Hello, and welcome, viewers, all the viewers of Going Elliptic. We are here with another episode. We have an interesting guest, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. As usual, there are just a few things to keep in mind before we roll in with our session today. Firstly, absolutely nothing that we say in this session is investment advice, so keep that in mind. We talk about a lot of things crypto. We talk about investment thesis. We talk about the markets. We talk about various other aspects, but those are meant to be the either the hosts or the guests' opinions on the subject, and by no means they should be construed as investment advice. Of course, you'll get a perspective, and you can do your own research and add this to your own broader thinking. So think of this more as educational content, as something you take away, and then you can build your own thesis on top of. The second part that, again, I would like to remind everyone, we are Going Elliptic on Twitter. The word Going Elliptic. We've got a Substack newsletter, which will be coming out with a newer edition very soon. We've written a few, and they're online. You can go check them out. We did an exhaustive piece on Bitcoin a little while back. We've done some on NFTs, DeFi, and I think most likely the next one that we would pick up may be ETH. And we'll talk about how ETH and just the overall sort of network around it, how does it play. So please do subscribe. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all those links from our Twitter handle. Go to our Twitter handle. You can follow that, and you can figure out all those details, or ping us there, drop us a note, and we'll be very happy to share those details with you. So with that said, let's jump in. Let's get the session started, and let's have fun.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks, Shanky. It's been another interesting weekend. Obviously, a lot of people watching the Euro final. So hopefully everyone's recovered from the result there. We won't spoil it for you. We won't say who won, but it was definitely a very exciting game. And yeah, not unlike the excitement in the crypto markets. You just never know whether it's going to be a day of winning or losing.
Truly, yeah. It's been quite a weekend for soccer. Both across two different continents. South America and Europe. And soccer fans have been busy, and you're absolutely right. The world of crypto also keeps going through its ups and downs and surprises. So we don't know what's unfolding in the coming week. Okay, with that said, Paul, so who do we have today? We know we have some interesting guests. Who do we have today?
Yeah, today is more of a fundamentals session. So that's where we always like to talk to investors and people across the crypto sphere, but especially fund managers. They have quite a unique perspective on things that perhaps us as kind of retail or just regular traders don't always have the same insights. So today we're talking with Matthew Graham, who's founder of Sino Global Capital. And yeah, really one of the bigger voices from at least the Asian kind of crypto markets. So yeah, let's bring him on.
Let's do it.
Good morning. Hi, it's great
Matthew.
to be here today.
Great to have you on board, Matthew. Thank you for joining our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Just having
Matthew,
my morning
I guess
coffee.
as a yeah, great. And as a way of kind of warming up, probably an easy one for you. What got you into crypto? We know you've kind of got this finance background and working for a VC, but was it personal or professional? And yeah, tell us a bit of that journey.
Sure. So I think you'd have to divide that into phases. The first phase was personal part-time involvement, and that was basically 2010 to 2013. And then phase two started very badly in 2013 when I had my banker hat on, and I very unsuccessfully tried to pitch one of the largest telecommunications companies in the world, manufacturers in the world, in developing a dedicated Bitcoin phone for Bitcoin power users, and they basically laughed me out of the room. So that was in 2013. So that was my first professional involvement, which was disastrous. And then I think, then in the post Ethereum phase, I had a number of angel investments in the space, which were spectacularly successful, so and post Ethereum, that really was Ethereum really was a game changer for me, and seeing that this was something that really was a much bigger story than Bitcoin, and a technology that I wanted to build my business and my career around. So pretty quickly, I entered full time with Sino, and we began focusing on principal investments first in the secondary market as we built up our competencies, and then more recently in the primary market as a VC.
Very cool. Yeah. So one question, Matthew, that we ask a lot of our guests, and this is an interesting sort of genesis story, if you may, that we hear is, when you got started with crypto, I'm sure there was that one moment out of these that you mentioned. It looks like it may have been your angel investments. There is that big aha moment. You feel like, okay, you know what? This is mainstream. This is where things are coming together, and I need to get serious about it. This can't just be a hobby. Was it the one for you there? Is that what clicked for you at that point in time? When did you start thinking like, hey, this got to be more than just like a side thing?
Sure, that's a good question. And so for me, it wasn't really about mainstream acceptance or those kind of exogenous indicators. For me, it was more thinking about Ethereum and seeing that we're now adding all new and different types of intelligence to transactions. That was more of the aha moment for me, and it was very clear to me that this was a transformational technology in the same way, really, that the internet. I don't think we've had a technology that's this important since the internet. So this really reminded me of the '90s, when I was too young to do anything about it career-wise, to be clear. but it reminded me of like Prodigy and CompuServe days, prior to Amazon, much prior to Google, and where you had that feeling that something was happening, and it wasn't mainstream yet, but this was definitely going to be super fucking huge. So to me, it was really thinking about how Ethereum was an indicator that this was now a much bigger story.
Totally. Yeah. No, totally. I think we are totally on the same plane with you there.
Yeah.
So the question that I think obviously that I would like to ask you is that what's the primary thesis behind all your investments today? Is that how you're looking at that world?
I'm sorry, the question is about our primary thesis?
Yeah, I'm saying like, see, what I took away from what you just said is that you see this as the next big quantum leap in terms of technology, right? It's a massive jump like the internet. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. At a high level, this is a generational technology. This is the biggest thing in decades. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Right. So I'm saying, like, when you look at your investments, which is more here and now and more operational, is that the lens that is the guiding, the big North Pole, if you may, or the Northern Star, which is telling you, hey, this is the generational technology, so I got to view with that lens.
I guess you could say that. Yeah, I mean, at a 10,000 foot view, our view is that this isn't like social networks and Facebook. This is bigger than that. This is an internet level technology.
Okay, very good.
I'd like to say, I think this might go over some people's heads, maybe because I'm too old, but if you've seen the movie The Graduate, very famous movie with Dustin Hoffman, and there's that scene where like the old guy is giving advice to the new guy on what his North Star should be, and he says, I just got one word for you. This is so long ago, right? So in The Graduate, the word that he whispered was plastics, which, probably true at that time, right? That's how Jack Welch got started with his career as a PhD before he much later became the CEO of GE. But, if they remade The Graduate, the word would be crypto.
That's a good one. I like that.
Nice.
Only people of a certain age may really appreciate that. But it really is that big. This is fucking huge.
Totally, totally. Yeah,
and
yeah.
we're early still.
Right. So where are you seeing your opportunities today? How are you viewing your, sort of investment thesis more on the ground, right? Like this year, next year, how are you parsing it?
So we do have top-down things that we look for, some fundamental ways of looking at the world. For example, one fundamental way of looking at the world that has been instrumental for us is the fact that we view finance fundamentally as a story of increasing abstraction and complexity over time. So that's
Mm-hmm.
certainly, and we view that as kind of inevitable with any financial market. That's certainly been an example of a top-down fundamental thesis that's done well for us. But while we have these top-down ways of looking at the world, we mostly start in a bottom-up way when we look at projects. So we first look at the team because we really have a long-term lens. So we first look at the team. Are these people we trust? Are these people that are fucking awesome that we want to support here in China for ideally, in the case where everything works out, for years to come? And then do they have a clean and differentiated vision, keeping in mind that if it's we invest across the spectrum, but for example, if it's early, they'll probably pivot, once
Mm-hmm.
or twice
Of
potentially,
course.
right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, you had Ethland that got off to a rocky start, and now it's just a sensationally successful project known as Ave. So you find your horses, people that are that you trust. It really starts with trust and comfort with the team, and then
Right.
knowing that they have world class ability, and then we support them here in China. We write strategic checks. It's a famously difficult market for even the best international projects in the world to be able to access and interact with in any kind of realistic way. And we have a team of China-focused experts that can help them do that. So we write strategic checks to the best projects in the world, for people that we trust and that we think are fucking awesome and want to hang out with for potentially years to come. That's basically our model.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Very
Yeah,
good. So it looks like there's definitely the China angle as well. I mean, you're
yeah,
looking at crypto as a set, but also helping them get inroads in there.
yeah.
Um, I want
That's
to
right.
ask, yeah, I want to ask you a couple of other things because I've, read things and heard you speak about it, and especially in terms of
Yeah.
markets. How do you view the macro picture, like the macroeconomic stuff with respect to how crypto is being viewed today? There is so much of narrative there. There is narrative, obviously, around all the money printing that has happened, last couple of years, thanks to COVID as well. There has been, fears of inflation. There has been this whole Bitcoin narrative around, hey, this is actually a hedge against inflation. How do you see that world panning out? Do you think it has an impact, or is that only like crypto Twitter noise?
I do think it has an impact, but I think that's so. I think that's more of a Bitcoin story. So obviously, Bitcoin affects everything throughout the market, even if it's just. I mean, it's still and will be for a long time to come. The big gorilla in the zoo. So it
Right.
definitely is more of a Bitcoin story, but then it spreads throughout everything. So we probably place a lot less emphasis on these kind of macroeconomic narratives than most of crypto, which is probably for a variety of reasons. But it's good for attracting people to Bitcoin. I'm pretty skeptical of inflation narratives in general. I think inflation is. I'm definitely not a macroeconomic economist, but you should probably I should probably defer to people that are, but definitely not defer to crypto Twitter when they start talking about potential 7-8% CPI and 2 years from now, things like that. That's probably um, that's for sure an edge case and an extreme scenario that has a very low probability of occurring. So, I mean, basically, look, Bitcoin is a hedge. It is an inflation hedge to the extent that that attracts people that are looking to use Bitcoin in lieu of gold or other hedges, that's enormously beneficial to the space. But that's one of the less important aspects to us, because it's, in my view, only minimally related to the qualities that crypto has that are transformational.
No, totally. I mean, we agree with you on that front. So one more small little piece, and I know we've got a lot to cover with you, but so there's this whole thing around EIP 1559 coming and Ethereum becoming a deflationary asset. At least that's also being pushed into the narrative. Any thoughts on that? Is that even going to, make any dent in the Ethereum universe, or nobody would care about that? About the whole deflationary aspect of.
I think that, so we are enormously bullish on Ethereum, as we have been for basically forever. I think with some of these aspects, I'm waiting to see how it plays out. But there's no question this is an important time for Ethereum. It's a little bit of a transition. The economics, I'm kind of waiting to see how it plays out in practice rather than on paper, so to speak.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well. I've kind of talked to how transformational Ethereum was for you. There's kind of changing the game a bit, but then we're also seeing, we saw the first wave of challenges with things like Tron and EOS, and now we're seeing perhaps more sophisticated challenges like Near and Solana. Do you think it's going to become more diverse across these challenger chains, or is Ethereum still going to kind of hold on to the kind of bulk of DeFi?
Sure. So we think Ethereum will be an enormous force for a very long time to come, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that it has a tremendous developer moat. With that said, the current wave of challengers is very different in many ways than what came before. As you mentioned just now, they're much more serious challengers, I think, in a lot of ways, much more credible people, frankly, and I think that in terms of the technology itself, there are some things that are really ready for prime time versus previous generations of challengers that really were not. So this is obviously an industry that is continuing to grow by leaps and bounds. There's room for multiple big players. Ethereum will be one. In our view, there will be other enormous players too. Obviously, we've made big bets on Solana, and we are cautiously optimistic about other chains too, such as Near, which I think is a little underrated. We definitely take a multi-chain approach.
Okay, so you are seeing like a multi-chain world for sure, right? Not a
absolutely
one winner takes all, right?
No, I don't think that's realistic. Not with this type of. I don't think you can think of it as, Ethereum is like HTTP or something like that, or it doesn't make any sense to us. We definitely have a multi-chain view.
Right. Yeah, a lot of this comparison, I think things like, this is the protocol kind of fails when you start looking at the diversity and richness of crypto.
Yeah.
How do you view the world of this whole multi-chain chains, if you may, right? We saw the emergence of ThorChain. We are seeing Polygon and Matic go that route, trying to bridge them all together. And of course, there are bazillion different bridges that exist. What do you think about that world of making them all work together? Yeah.
Anything that is cross-chain is going to be simultaneously enormously important and also enormously difficult. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the space for bridges and also cross-chain wallets, things like that. We have I'm not sure if we've announced it yet. I would have to check, but we have a major investment in a cross-chain wallet, and So all of these are going to be in very important aspects of a multi-chain world. There's no question. I think it's still very early for those applications. I don't think we're even ready to pronounce that there are any long-term winners.
Right, right. But you do see them building out, I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and perhaps there's also some chains that we don't hear as much about, such in the kind of global sense, but are still quite active. Obviously, VE chain in Asia being one of those where it's more app centric. It's not so DeFi, but they still seem to be going strong. Just not many people really pay attention. Is there something to regional or application-specific chains that you think might be interesting?
Did you say VE chain? Did I hear that correctly? Yeah. So, very openly, I've never seen VE chain in the wild, and I live in China. So
interesting. Okay.
Take away from that whatever you want. But I do think there are some very I do believe if I go to like a certain Walmart in Shanghai or something, and then I walk into the seafood section, it'll be there. I'm told. I don't know, but but look, there are for sure a lot of regional differences in development, and China will definitely have some regional, some local chains that are probably going to be quite successful. However, I think those are more likely to be tokenless chains, obviously relating to the China government priorities. To give an example of that, in Alipay now, there are actually NFTs embedded in the app that you can buy, but it's tokenless. So behind the scenes, I think it's Ant Chain, I think is what it's called, if I recall correctly. But it's a tokenless blockchain. So there are likely to be a lot of China local winners, but those are far more likely to be this kind of neutered tokenless blockchain in the long term. With that said, it's pretty complicated too, because obviously anything related to Binance Smart Chain is far more popular in China maybe than in other areas of the world. So there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes in crypto native communities, but in kind of a broader sense, I think it's much more likely to be these neutered tokenless blockchains that take off in mainland China.
Interesting. Yeah, we don't hear of them outside of China. Now, one question that pops up in my mind was the Binance Smart Chain in some sense the starting point for a lot of DeFi in China? Because again, this is external perception. Maybe it's all wrong, it's all rubbish, but the perception is that China is more of a centralized exchange world, less of the classic Ethereum DeFi type of space that people on crypto Twitter or a lot of the people in Europe or the Americas are talking about. Is that a fair assessment, or am I just totally reading this wrong?
No, I think that's it. That's true. DeFi took off in China a little bit later than elsewhere for a variety of reasons. And when it did take off, I think it was definitely more focused on Binance Smart Chain and also Polkadot, for sure.
I see. Okay. So Polkadot is popular in China, like within
Polkadot is enormously popular in China relative to the West. Yeah, that's correct.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, do you think that is in fitting with the kind of regulatory framework that either the users or the people developing on, kind of feel like they have to fit within something that's perhaps not as fully decentralized as it would otherwise be?
No, I don't. I don't think it's for anything related to regulation. I think it's I think it's it's cultural or ideological in the sense that I do think it's fair to say that there is less emphasis in China on these kind of litmus tests that we view as enormously important in the West, such as is this really crypto ethos? Is this really decentralized? Things like that. So those are probably less important in the China market, which allows things like Binance Smart Chain that might be kind of shunned in other places to still be able to grow. I think that's the first thing. And then I think it's kind of about relationship circles as well. So obviously Binance is very China centric. Gavin Wood spent a lot of time in Shanghai, and Polkadot has done a great job locally, probably better than almost any international project in building out its China community, things like that. So I think it's more about cultural and ideological along with relationship circles, but it's not directly about regulatory things. In terms of answering the question, why is DeFi more BSC and Polkadot centric relative to the West?
Yeah, no, and I think you can also see similar things perhaps in other markets like Korea, where it is quite insular, and everything that or projects at least that have made the effort to get in there can be enormously successful, like Terra and with the Mirror protocol. But I want to jump back to China a little bit, and obviously the last few months we've been talking a lot about, kind of China FUD. Is there really a crackdown? Is it just about mining? Is it across crypto? Is it really to protect the retail users? Would love to kind of hear your thoughts on what's the sensible kind of view of how crypto can still exist in China, and kind of ignoring the FUD.
Sure. So I think you have to divide it into two facets. The first facet is the mining. And so as we know, most large-scale mining is no longer okay throughout China. And so that basically accelerated a process that was already underway of hash rate moving to international. Personal or small scale or home mining is still okay. And then the second, and that may or may not be related to environmental imperatives, and it may or may not be related to the fact that Bitcoin effectively is an end around for people who want to get around capital controls. The renminbi, of course, is not a free floating currency. So you can buy Bitcoin machinery, you can buy miners in renminbi, and then your output is Bitcoin, which is outside the capital control regime. So it's an end around. So there are the stated reasons for the mining crackdown, and it's a little bit harder to say what they're actually related to behind the scenes. But that's the first aspect of the crackdown. And then the second aspect is, and I think it's important to keep in mind that crypto is a part of this story. At a high level, the Chinese government is enormously concerned about excessive retail speculation throughout financial markets, and then crypto is included in that story as a small part of that greater story. And so basically it's not affecting things like, is Bitcoin still considered an asset that you can, a commodity that you are free to own? It's not related to whether that's okay or not, but it is related to, is it still okay to go nuts on leverage on OKX or whatever exchange with 50x leverage like a crazy person? And some of those things are no longer viewed as okay, which frankly in my view is healthy, because I'm not really sympathetic to the need for retail investors to be aping on massive leverage on Bitcoin, much less going crazy with whatever shitcoin is popular this week.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's really is similar to other regulators like UK and US, where they're just saying, hey, that's not a safe product to be offering generally to retail users. So
tend
it's
to be
not
pretty
China
sympathetic
specific,
to
really.
those arguments. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it becomes closer to gambling at that point. You know what I mean?
It
Where
sure
people
does.
are just punting on high leverage on shit coins for sure. There isn't much of a difference than just outright gambling. So,
and then even aside from that, you have these enormous financial schemes that can metastasize in China almost overnight. You never hear about most of them internationally, but they can really very quickly, especially on a regional basis, grow to having tens of thousands or more token holders overnight. And usually they have multi-level marketing and also Ponzi economic features, and it's really quite dangerous for retail investors. Recently, there was one that started in a small town in the middle of nowhere called Loser Coin, and you probably haven't. I forget the Chinese name of that one actually, Diaosubi or something like that. But anyway, Loser Coin, and so you probably never heard about that internationally, right? But it grew to enormous size, and so obviously these things are not sustainable, even in the way something like Doge or even Shiba is, right? They inevitably will collapse, and if you have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people involved, this is a problem. I'm quite sympathetic to that argument.
yeah,
Loser Coin is probably not your IBM style investment.
for sure.
Not quite like an S&P index fund. Probably on the other side of that spectrum, right?
Totally. Yeah. And we've seen a lot of that. And that keeps coming up in the bull run. I think every time we have a bull run, we do see these loser coins, if you may. I'm going to use that word as a category, emerge suddenly out of the left field, right? They come and become super popular overnight. So
this was a cultural thing. It was kind of a pushback on there's this 996 working culture in many companies for young people, especially tech companies. You work 6 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And so recently there's been a little bit of a cultural pushback from younger people about having to work this lifestyle. And maybe a decade or two ago, there's the sense that you could work that lifestyle and kind of work the system and come out of it with great opportunities on the other end. But maybe there's the sense that that's not quite true or as true as before. So there's a little bit of a cultural pushback against extreme working styles. So that's I think that's related to how something. It's not an accident that it was branded Loser Coin, right? It's this kind of pushback.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a part of a cultural pushback against being part of a system where you're working 80 hours a week as a kid, basically. Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of these things can have social elements as well, which is probably makes it even more sensitive.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think the social elements, memes, narratives, they are the thing. They connect with a lot of people. A lot of people get emotionally attached to those, not so much from a rational standpoint.
Yeah. And again, it was created in by a just a loser in a small town, right? And I say that with a little bit of affection, right? It was created by a nobody in a small town,
right?
It I think it kind of captured a cultural moment as well, which is why it was able to quickly become an enormously big project over here, actually.
Interesting. We're going to dig in a bit about that.
What's
Yeah,
that?
I think also it's interesting to see, like even some of the dog coins. Once we had Doge and then Shiba, and we got like 50 or 60 more dog coins,
Yeah,
tokens on Ethereum launching every day. I think there's perhaps a similar kind of well, this might be my chance to break out of the monotonous life and get some unreal gains from it. And
exactly.
it's both a very appealing narrative to certain audiences, but also one that's very dangerous, as they might get burnt if it's their first crypto exposure and then they turn their back.
Yeah, I still can't believe all my fuck Elon coins didn't take off. Just kidding. But I did. I don't know if they had those internationally, but I saw there were at least a couple fuck Elon, fuck Musk coins that were being passed around the China market. I don't know if you guys had that. I don't know if that was international as much.
Well, it was talked about. We didn't see those coins, but there have been all other types of coins. There have been, I think there's like an ass coin and
Yeah.
Talk about it being joke, but and they were all mooning. People were jumping and running behind it to go get a piece of it. So
possibly a sign of froth. Certainly in retrospect.
Totally, 100%.
Great. And we're going to bring in some of the audience questions as well, because there's a few here in the chat. So bring up this one from Gav. What's the most underappreciated narrative in DeFi right now?
Certainly one thing that we are super excited about is so far on, I think a lot of people know that we're big investors in the Solana ecosystem. And so in Solana's development, kind of the first stage is porting over or replicating functions that are already on Ethereum. But what we're really excited for is what, in our view, is the second phase. And the second phase, which I think is not quite beginning yet, but will soon. In the second phase, we think we will see projects start to take advantage of Solana's unique design space. And so specifically, Solana is about 10,000 times faster, 10,000 times cheaper than Ethereum. That opens up an enormous opportunity for new project designs. And there's a huge space to be very creative. This will be especially important for fintech applications, DeFi applications, I think. So we're super excited about the creativity that inevitably will come out of that new. Inevitably will take advantage of this new technology.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I can definitely see it as an extension from what has been there.
I think is
the
ring. Okay.
Yep.
I think I know 0xGav. You know all these people from the internet, right? From Twitter or Discord or whatever.
Correct. That's interesting.
Even when they're, what is this P-dip? I can't really see because
so his questions around your thoughts on the latest MEV and reorg drama. This is obviously affecting Ethereum at the moment, and kind of hopefully once we get to proof of stake for Ethereum, this won't be as much of an issue, but we've still got a way to go, and MEV and reorgs seem to be picking up pace.
Sure. So the reorg drama, I'm not sure I'm fully up to speed on this because I've been swamped, but the reorg drama, as I understand it, was someone was proposing on Twitter possible ways to take advantage of changes in this proof of stake move, and they were kind of proposing active ways to reorg in certain situations, such as if there was a hack, things like that. Is that basically correct?
Yeah, and I think also, they're already looking at it, whether it's ETH Classic or a current Ethereum, plus once we move to proof of stake. So it kind of spans the spectrum there, and it's perhaps something that hasn't been discussed as much as it should have been in the past.
Sure. So, so again, I'm not fully up to speed on this topic, but in terms of recent developments, especially in the last couple of days, but I would certainly say I'm not supportive of active efforts to cause reorgs. I think that's fundamentally the opposite of what we want to be focused on. However, with that said, anything that any discussion of that, or even attempts to do it that are thwarted, are supportive of anti-fragility, which is long-term extremely important. So I guess I'm excited to see people push back on these efforts, which will only increase the strength of the Ethereum ecosystem. So I would kind of phrase it in that way.
Yeah, I think whenever we do see these types of things, hopefully it does result in Ethereum being stronger for it. So
Can I let me see if I can? Now I can see who's asking the questions. So that's my answer to PDIP.
Cool. Great. And he also posed another question there a bit earlier. So bring that up. What would you suggest to somebody starting out their own investment company, whether that's inside or outside of China? Is there some lessons from your early days of actually carving it out yourself?
Sure. So I think, I guess investment company in this case means a fund, presumably. So I think it's difficult for a couple reasons. I think it's difficult to go directly into starting a fund for a couple reasons. So first and foremost, the fund model typically is 2 and 20, right? So it's 2% of assets under management and then 20% of profits generated. In practice, it's frequently a little more complex than that. There are thresholds and things like that, depending. But 2 and 20, right? So the issue then is that if you have a micro fund in the short and medium term, you're going to have to live off of those 2% of assets under management, and that's not going to support very many. That's not going to support a very big team. So this is basically a known problem in TradFi, that microfunds are really quite difficult as anything more than maybe a passion project. So in crypto, it's obviously much easier to break in and do cool things. But I think fundamentally the easier angle is to start with prop capital and get started that way. I think the most important thing though is you have to have clear differentiation. So I think you'll have to have a very keen sense of what you're doing or are able to do that is different than almost anything else. So for us, obviously, that's writing strategic checks that help international projects succeed in arguably the world's most important crypto market, and certainly the most difficult for international projects. So that's our value prop, right? So you really have to have a cleanly differentiated value prop, I think. Otherwise, you're at risk of getting stuck in that micro fund no man's zone.
If I may, I want to add a little extension to that question.
Yeah.
So we are familiar with a certain way of, exactly like you mentioned, the 2 and 20, and set up a fund, get a bunch of LPs who are probably either other funds or accredited investors or something of that form, and then of course go chase those big returns, right? And the big returns hopefully will come in 10 years, and until then, you hopefully try and figure out with 2% or do other things. within the Chinese ecosystem,
Yeah.
is that also a common model? I mean, we do know that there's a lot of venture funding going on in China at large, beyond crypto as well. There's lots of innovation in progress, but within the crypto world, is that also something that's as popular?
So I think you have to divide China crypto into a very, very small slice of players that are more sophisticated and more institutional. That's really a thin cut, a thin slice.
Right.
And then a huge, vast swath of people that are doing things that are frankly less sophisticated or have non-standard models and things like that. So, for example, among the less sophisticated players, a common model might be something like you guarantee that you guarantee the principal investment, and then you split the profits, something like that.
Right.
So instead of 2 and 20, it would be 0 and 50, but you got to protect the principal investment. Guarantee the principal investment would be an example of a less sophisticated model. And again, the vast majority of the China crypto market, frankly, is less sophisticated models. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, it's interesting. The other thing I see, at least from my own perspective, is if you look at traditional finance, you have almost in some sense a maturation and segmentation of the types of funds, right? There are some which act as the classic VC early stage funds. There's some that obviously playing more as PEs, later stage, or public companies type of investments. And then of course there are hedge funds, and there are so many other types, right? But I'm saying there's very clear demarcation. What I see in the crypto institution space is that sometimes there are these hybrid funds. They're kind of quasi VC fund and quasi hedge fund. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of roles. So would you agree? I mean, sort of is the case, right?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to be said for hybrid models in crypto, for more sophisticated products, sophisticated investors, sophisticated fund managers. That's something that can make a lot of sense. Probably we'll see more specialization over time, and I think my base case would be that the hybrid models become less and less frequent over time. But at the current stage of the overall industry's maturity, I think there's a lot to be said for these hybrid models. That's not quite the same as these messy models that tend to predominate in the China market.
Yeah. Interesting. But you do see them more specialized, that means. I mean, if I heard you right, what you're saying is that instead of hybrid, you'll start seeing a little bit more specialized models. Some will succeed, some of course will crash and burn, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of my base case. I think any industry, all other factors being equal, I think almost any industry tends toward increasing specialization over time. So my base case would be that hybrid models will get less and less frequent, and we'll see more specialization of function. That really it's just more based on the history of emergent industries rather than anything specific to crypto itself. I would have that base case expectation.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess fundamentally we're going to see just more and more institutions or existing funds entering the space. If we look out over a decade or so, I just can't see a scenario in which that doesn't continue to grow. So what's your kind of long-term view, and how do you keep Sino having that differentiator as more and more other institutions or funds enter the space?
So I think I think there is a huge advantage to first or early movers. Number one.
Yep.
Number two, I do think we're in a nice place in the fact that there is almost, or basically, I would argue, no one doing what we're doing. We're extremely clearly differentiated. Writing strategic checks with a focus on China. There's almost no one else doing that. But then I think, you have to be relentlessly competitive with yourself in terms of improving your capacity all the time. And so that's kind of a challenge for us to compete with ourselves in that way.
So just one more small question I want to ask you, Matthew, is,
Yeah.
in the sort of Western world, especially in the United States, bigger funds have started at least, scratching the surface of crypto. They're almost looking at it as, yet another alternative investment. A few of them, not all of them, but they've begun to explore, begun to talk about it. And of course, we've also heard about companies, a couple of them have made more news than they need to, but, about holding it on their balance sheet. So is that a thing in China as well? Are Chinese banks, institutions, companies also saying, hey, we should maybe pick up some crypto?
I don't think people are public about it in the way that they are there's not going to be a micro strategy where
Right, coming out of China. Is there one? Is there a Michael Saylor version of China?
I think because of the China regulatory sensitivity, it's not going to be quite the same thing. So, but what you're seeing is people in a very low key way behind the scenes getting involved, but I don't think it's likely that anyone will have the balls to go after it in a Michael Saylor kind of way, and that's probably smart. I think it probably would not be a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So,
well, yeah,
so much is the gray area here in China, and so I think there's an analogy. There's a famous analogy about the Communist Party is like a big snake in the chandelier, and everyone's going out there about their business below in a crowded room, and so the snake is kind of sleepy and sluggish, and it's very well fed. But do you really want to be the person who's causing the most commotion below? Probably not.
Interesting analogy, but yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you. I hear you. It can be unnecessarily dangerous, right? Like uncalled for.
Yeah.
You can do good things without worrying that sleeping giant, if you may.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Great. Well, yeah, we've got one last kind of segment we'd like to just run through quickly before we reach the hour, and that's our rapid fire. So we'll fire quickly some questions at you and off the cuff. So first one, if you had to choose one of these to trade, would it be NFTs, DeFi, or Bitcoin?
DeFi.
Cool.
Good choice.
In one sentence, what's common between the 2017 and 2021 bull runs?
A lot of innovation that will ultimately come out of what looks in the short term like disastrous ideas. It is the most interesting thing that they have in common. I guess what the most obvious thing they have in common is retail people coming in and being fucking idiots and doing new dog coins or whatever, and then all of a sudden you have celebrities doing some bullshit. I guess that's the most obvious common feature, but the most interesting common feature is the innovation that comes out of things that look initially like they're just fucking horrible and disasters.
I get you. Yep. Third one, in your opinion, what's the single biggest use case for crypto?
Rebuilding financial infrastructures in a more modern and intelligent way.
Cool. Okay. And yeah, is there one educational resource or tool you would recommend to a new trader entering into crypto?
A new trader? A new trader is a tougher question, but I would say for I know the Lau brothers want me to mention the Daily Ape, which is a good one.
Cool.
But so a new trader is a little bit more difficult. But I would say for a new entrant in the space, Andreas Antonopoulos' books, Mastering Bitcoin and Mastering Ethereum, are actually available on his GitHub, so you don't even have to pay money. And then also the University in Nicosia has an outstanding MOOC, which is also free, Introduction to Digital Currency, something like that. And then the DeFi books from CoinGecko and friends, there are two now. Those are outstanding. So those are three great ways to get up to speed, all of which I did at one point myself, by the way. And then you have a lot of great resources out there, a lot of great tools such as the Block and Masari and Delphi Digital and things like Nansen. So there's a lot of ways to get up to speed, but there's a long learning curve as well.
Yeah, and sometimes those of us that have been in it for coming up a decade, we kind of forget even some of the learning journey we went through. So yeah, it's good to hear Antonopoulos, Andreas's kind of stuff in there, because that is really timeless.
He's a boss. He's an boss. I love that guy. I don't know him personally, but he's a fucking boss.
His stuff is really good, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll try to get him on the show sometime. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Last rapid fire question for you. All right. Last question is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, DeFi makes, and it's kind of open ended there. Is it?
DeFi makes my job so fucking exciting. I honestly couldn't imagine doing anything else. I fucking love my job, and I have to thank not just blockchain and crypto for that, but especially DeFi specifically.
Awesome answer.
Yeah,
that's fire.
Fantastic. And yeah, overall, we've really enjoyed, talking to you on this session. That's been really fantastic. I know there's even a bunch more comments in the chat that people have posted in there that really liked what you've had to share, and hopefully everyone has kind of learned something as well.
All right, I had a fun time.
I have one more thing to ask you. One last thing before we let you go.
Sure, yeah.
So one, is the bull market over? What do you think?
No, I don't think it is. I think we've had some negative. So, I mean, that's a question about time duration, right? So I think, what's your horizon? But we've had some negative catalysts in recent months, obviously. China, first and foremost, and then Elon fucking Musk as a secondary, the guy. And then, I think that crypto generally, and especially sub-topics, most notably DeFi, are still quite positive on the fundamentals in the medium and long term, which is where my specific focus is.
Excellent. Love to hear that.
Great.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming. We really had fun talking to you. And
thanks for keeping me company while I had my morning coffee.
Well, we'll call you more often. I think we love your opinion. We'll definitely love to have you in some of our panels as well. We do try to put those together every few months or so. And the next time we have that, we will definitely love to have you on.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Great. All right. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. That was a great session there. And yeah, I know a lot of people, unfortunately, we couldn't get through all of the questions there, but we'll try to follow up some of those on Twitter. Obviously, you can follow us there. And yeah, also we'll post some links in the show notes to some of the educational resources that Matthew mentioned there. That was really great.
Yeah, that's true. Good stuff. Again, good speakers make the show exciting. So we'll continue to try and bring more speakers like Matthew. They've got lots to share, great journeys, great experiences, lots of wisdom. So we love that.
Perfect. Well, with that, we'll wrap up this week's Going Elliptic's fundamentals, but do join us again another time. And yeah, we hope everybody has a great kind of crypto week in the markets this week.
Exactly. Stay safe, use your judgment, and enjoy the week ahead. Let's keep going elliptic.
Right. See you next time.